Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Well, thank you for coming back to my channel. This is about Putin's press conference. So around this time of year, he always does his press conference since he first became president in 2000. And back then, it really was a breath of fresh air, in as much as coming out of the Soviet era, only 9 years earlier, it was all very tight-lipped. Press conferences were all but known. It was unknown. It was kind of a complete control freak society. The public were told almost nothing about the political leader before Gorbachev. They weren't even told if the leader was married or not, things like that. And so these were all careful communiques that were released to the press, and the media was very strictly controlled. And there was a free-for-all in the 90s. For the 90s, even the first few years of Putin, Russia had a genuinely free media space. Obviously, that's long gone. So he, bit by bit, dismantled it and piecemeal built up the totalitarian system they have today, about which more later, envious of the Great Firewall of China, or a sovereign internet, so that he can block harmful, i.e. true, statements and things like that. So they shut off the traffic in loads of streets, inconvenience millions of Muscovites anywhere he's going, because he is obviously really worried about his own security, but also just to underline how important he is. He'll make life difficult for millions of people because they're nothing, be massively late to things. That's one of the ways which is a complete wanker. One of the things I respect about the Royal family, and they deserve to be heavily criticized too, is they are bang on time. They behave decently like that. Okay. So his press conference went ahead as usual, but of course it's choreographed. I mean, they're pretending, oh, it's all spontaneous, but that's not. The questions are chosen. But there is no reason to be optimistic about negotiations with the United States over Ukraine. Remember, he doesn't want to negotiate with Ukraine. Ukraine's a non-country in his view. It's simply part of Russia. And so he reiterated yet again that Russia will fight on until all its objectives have been obtained, and that he's sure that Russia is going to win. Now, Russia is creeping forward, controlled 18% of Ukraine this time last year, now controls 19%, in exchange for about 300,000 casualties, about 25% of whom are killed. But he's obviously banking on Ukraine suddenly imploding, and then he can go very forward, far forward very quickly and take the whole country. Ukraine is under strain, and the desertions are worse than ever. So I'm thinking about how the Ukrainians should do. They've got a couple of hundred foreign prisoners of war, as in all fighting for Russia. Seen interviews with Egyptians and Somalis and so on. So I would say we'll offer you citizenship on day one to change sides, and that salary, whatever it is, 500 euros a month, which in some countries is good money, or you stay in prison the rest of your life, which you prefer. Be like Russia and recruit more people from abroad to fight for you, like Pakistan, where they're having an economic crisis. Whoever, say to Russian dissidents, particularly those from Chechnya or whatever, come to Ukraine, you can get instant citizenship, partly to build up their population, and they'll just work in some of the industries, things like that. Okay, but what else? So he's going to fight on, and there's really no sign he's going to end the war anytime soon. And I know there are economic difficulties for Russia, but they could fight on maybe even for 5 years, depending how far he's willing to push the Russian people. The sovereign wealth fund will be gone. They've raised taxes, have raised it again. They'll cut spending in other areas again. There could be demonstrations. How far can he go before the mass unrest is so bad he has to end the war? At the moment, there is like no anti-war demonstrations. So he's very much got a handle on things like that. And that's why he's let people leave, because he'd rather they'd left the country than they're at home causing trouble. Okay, and so yet again, he told another blatant lie, claiming that Ukraine started the war and that the collective West are the ones who are responsible for this, which is absolutely not true when Russia's been attacking Ukraine for 20 years. And obviously mostly since 2014, but the attempted murder of Viktor Yushchenko in 2004. Okay, so he said he would only parley if these things were on his terms. So he says Russia's not responsible for the war or any of the casualties, yet more blatant lies. No lie is too obvious or too shameful for him to tell. And of course, he'll never be challenged. The Russian media will never call him out on this. And if you tell people a lie often enough, they will believe it. I can't remember the name of that psychological experiment where, everybody says that something is blue, there's actually red, and the last person doubts himself. I mean, am I going out of my mind? I don't believe my eyes. But you can get people to believe anything if you did it into them incessantly. And it's working. And obviously, they don't even dare think dissentient thoughts because the penalties are so harsh. But he just doesn't have good news. He says they're advancing across the battlefield. Yeah, they're still fighting in cities they announced they took months ago. Even been pushed back in a few places around Pokrovsk, and I cannot believe that Russia still hasn't taken it. I thought it was going to fall much earlier this year. So yet again, he denounced the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, said that they are the ones who provoked the war, that they are aggressors, which is absolutely preposterous. It's a defensive alliance, and all right, you could argue about the bombing of Yugoslavia. But it was Russia that legally occupies Moldova and Georgia, as well as this. Goodness, had carried out continuous atrocities in Syria. Oh, but if Assad falls, then all hell broke loose. It's far, far better since Assad fell. I mean, there are problems, but it's not as bad as it was under him. And he said it was wrong of other countries to freeze Russian assets. So just in case you think sanctions don't work, they do hurt him, which I was complaining. He said they're robbing these things. It weaken trust in international financial system. Yeah, because he's so trustworthy. Well, to say he's right, that states like Saudi Arabia or Iran or whatever, well, Iran's got the frozen, China, will be chary about putting these things there for fear it might get removed. But we know that we've got leverage over him. If you're good, you can have this returned. He said that Russia is not preparing to attack Europe. Well, I mean, there's evidence that they are. I mean, they've got their hands full in Ukraine, obviously, but they've been across the border into Estonia to kidnap someone years ago. And what else do? They obviously have their cyber attacks in these various countries in the Baltics, and they interfere with the navigation system for the planes. I don't think they'll attack anytime soon, not till they're finished in Ukraine. But the thing is, if they really are defeated in Ukraine, or their losses are just so high, they won't be able to contemplate that for a very long time. So yes, he said it's true that the economy is slowing, only to 1% growth this year. Even that's probably a lie. But he said this was intentional. The objective was to reduce inflation. Another lie. Inflation's got worse. It's like at least 8%. So, but that's not crisis level. It's nowhere as high as hyperinflation. And so we go on. The UK dealt with worse inflation than that a few years ago. So he said that the gross domestic product has grown a lot. So the tax changes are right. Well, the tax changes are completely due to the war, but this really is unsustainable. I mean, there are far more deaths than births. So he talked about demography. Well, he's definitely failed on that, and national values, which I suppose just really means homophobia. So he's banging on about the need to increase births for years, and he's only ever managed to decrease it and get a lot of young men killed. So that's not helping, and others to flee the country. So anyway, he says that he's ready to speak to Ukraine, but they have to give up land. So he's not willing to speak to them. He could end the war today, just end it, just withdraw, say no more fighting, be over. So this is actually rather unimpressive. It went on for over 4 hours. I don't know how he controls his natural functions for so long. And he tried to project an image of self-assurance and truculence and so on. So it's not looking good for those of us who'd like to see peace, really. And then he parried Steve Rosenberg, the BBC's correspondent's question, saying, is it going to continue like this? More internet shutdowns? Well, yeah, it is going to, in other words. So the future for Russia, it looks quite bleak. They're selling less oil and gas abroad than ever at a lower profit margin. And, you can judge them by their friends. He wants to dine at the top table, be considered, at parity with the United States. Definitely other major countries, but there he's left with North Korea. He's left playing second fiddle to Xi Jinping. He meets leaders from places like Chad and Pakistan. Now, as a chauvinist who has the most withering disdain for countries which are not as puissant as his, this is not company he would wish to keep. Now, I think it's completely respectable to have state visits or any sort of visit with countries with the smaller populations, not very economically developed, but Putin doesn't think that way. He's simply inviting them en faute de mieux, see them as potential allies as part of the global south, of the global majority, as though Ukraine was part of the scramble for Africa or something. But yeah, so he had a ready answer because presumably he was rehearsed, but obviously a hand-picked audience, but it's not delivered with the same panache. He just doesn't have a good story to tell anymore. Well, thanks for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon, donate to PayPal, georgecannon7@gmail.com. Goodbye.